The UK, like every Western nation really, has been fed a huge con when it comes to mass immigration and multiculturalism. On the surface, the modern multicultural world was supposed to be the end of national identification and the beginning of a loving utopia where the lion and lamb lay down together, everybody embracing equality and financial security, the 1960s utopian vision come alive. Yet you'd have to be pretty ideologically possessed or just naive to think that's the real aim of the powers that be here. In essence, what's truly happened is the traditional cultures of the Western nations has had to be debased, and that's allowed an international finance capitalism to come in and implement something of a new world order. This means we're now governed by an international financial elite that doesn't like borders, it doesn't like national identity, because such things imply that there's something out there in life that's more important than money and financial gain. It's also why modern Western cities like London feel increasingly soulless. They're a rat race full of people concerned only with themselves and their material gains. Yes, the city still boasts the wonderful architecture and history of old, but when you go there, you quickly see that there's something tragic about it. There's a betrayal of what London was and what it's become. And you might ask, well, why haven't people noticed that this push for massive immigration and multiculturalism is just a front for a globalist agenda? Well, this brings us to the second core point. All of this is held in place by a replacement of our traditional moral system with the global leftist ideology in its new tenets. This ideology, sometimes tacitly and sometimes bluntly, tells Westerners that their history is an evil one, that they are evil people, and the only way to recover from this sinful state is to accept each of the tenets of tolerance and diversity. We see this in full swing every single day, where we hear someone being accused of racism. Whether they're actually racist or not is of course irrelevant. Racism, as I'm sure you've noticed, is pretty much the worst thing you can be accused of in this day and age. You'll lose your career over it, you'll be a social outcast. And of course my aim here isn't to make a defence for anybody who's cruel to someone on the account of their skin colour or immutable characteristics. It's to make the point, when did racism become the very worst moral crime one can commit? Well, in essence, it started when the European nations started to lose their traditional identities, and it's created a situation now in which if you used a racist term, say 10 years ago on Twitter, you'll be showered with more opprobrium than a person who cheated on his wife and abandoned his children. Now, if you put these two things together, you can see what this has created is a world in which anybody who's even mildly critical of mass immigration is immediately told that they're an evil person and a racist. Now, while many people are starting to wake up to this across Europe, many people are still completely lost in this fever dream, and they don't see a very dark dimension that's developing. This is what we witness here on Twitter. You see this sort of thing every day. This fella starts by stating he wants Europe to remain white and Christian. Already you can feel a slight edge to his language. That's been drilled into us by the globalist elite. Yet if we say a Middle Easterner wants the Middle East to remain Arab and Muslim, does that carry the same weight? What about if a Japanese person says, I want Japan to remain Japanese and Shinto? Of course, there's no controversy there at all. They're perfectly natural things to desire. Yet Europeans, remember, must hold their heads in shame due to the supposed sins of their forefathers. And if they don't, they'll get this response. Sorry, mate, you invaded their countries. Now they invade yours. It's just a bit of banter. This tells us a lot about how the people coming here actually think. They don't think in terms of coming here to enrich the country, as we're so often told. Many are coming because they believe it's an act of revenge. Now, while I'm sure there are some people who come here from other parts of the world that do want to integrate, that do bring something economically or culturally to the continent, however, the massive hordes largely are low-skilled and know that they're not bringing really anything of cultural or economic value. And further, carrying their own resentment from history, they buy into the same woke ideology coming out of our universities, that they are the forever, eternally morally pure third worlders, and we are the evil, oppressive colonizers who deserve everything we get. Yet there is quite a big flaw in this argument. They often accuse the West of invading said countries, taking the resources, etc. Yet this ignores one very important point not many people are willing to actually say in this day and age. When the European nations started to colonize other nations, it wasn't like those nations were very advanced. Now, of course, you're not supposed to note this in the modern world. You're supposed to engage in doublethink. You're supposed to admire countries like India and the continent of Africa for having ancient, magical, mysterious civilizations, while simultaneously believing we were completely evil for going over there and conquering them. Yet, of course, that begs a very important question. If they were so advanced and magical in their culture, how were we able to go over there and so easily colonize them? The answer is that they've been around for thousands of years and didn't really create that much. And people like me for stating this can be called evil and all the names under the sun, but it's just a harsh reality that the culture of the world developed in and came from Europe. Secondly, while there were many sins connected to colonialism, we also advanced many nations well beyond where they were. We gave them medicine, we gave them political systems, we connected them to international markets, we introduced them to differing peoples and different technological models. As I've said many times before, we always hear how evil the West is for getting involved in the Middle East, and many times we shouldn't have. However, would Dubai be as rich as it is without the Western world? What about Saudi Arabia? We're the ones who showed them how to synthesize oil, gave them all the technology to make it work, and on top of that, gave them the global market so they could sell all of their produce. If we were so unrelentingly evil, why wouldn't we have just taken it all for ourselves? We could have done. Yet while all of this is going on, we have gormless politicians on morning TV coming up after the most tattooed woman in Britain. On top of that, leaders across the Western world who are absolutely obsessed with pride movements. Pride movements, by the way, that beneath the glitz and showiness basically just support left-wing ideology, like these two lovely ladies, and sorry for the language in advance.
Free Palestine, bitch. Free Palestine, you fucking bitch, you're ugly.
Now, given there's such a huge failure of many European peoples to actually wake up to what's going on here, and second to that, we have massive hordes of people coming in, many of whom want revenge, to me it seems like the future is going to likely be some sort of balkanization. Yet as this fella points out on Twitter, people need to start to realise they might not want identity politics, but identity politics wants them. He's essentially advocating for a Christian vote, and I think that's the only way to move forward, to agitate for your own and your own people's interests if you wish to salvage anything of your culture into the long run now. After all, it's what everyone else does. Either we just get swept up or we wake up to the world of the brave new world's politics. Finally, I'm going to leave you with a little speech from Tristan Tate of all people, who seems to understand what's going on here.
From the longbowmen who stood their ground against the French knights at Agincourt, and the sailors of Nelson's fleet in the Trafalgar Cape in 1805, all the way through to the soldiers who charged the beaches at Normandy, and the brave men and women who withstood the Blitz and the relentless bombing of London. Each and every one of these people did what they did for a common idea, the idea of being British. Our whole country is in the grip of an establishment which wishes to wash away everything it means to be an Englishman, or a Scotsman, or a Welshman, to tell you that you cannot be proud of who you are or where you come from. To tell you that you can't be proud of our little island which conquered and civilized the entire world. The island that wrote and signed the Magna Carta. The island whose language dominates the global culture and is spoken in every corner of the globe. This is our moment. This is our last chance to salvage what is left of the United Kingdom before it is too late. Before our way of life exists only in history books, taught somewhere in Russian or Chinese, culminating in the story of how we lost it all, how we threw it all away. Young men of England, it's down to you now.
Well said indeed. These are just my thoughts, however. Do let me know what you think down below, and do consider subscribing to the channel.